front left, front right, center, front right, surround right, surround back right, surround back left, surround left, front height left, front height right, rear height right, rear height left.
Setting up your Dolby Atmos system can sometimes take the fun out of the experience. We all rely heavily on room correction on some level, but sometimes room correction can do some weird things to your high frequencies, mids, and probably the most common issue with room correction is severely limiting the bass. But room correction focuses more on, well, room correction, correcting the acoustic issues in your room, while object-based audio calibration kind of takes a back seat. But what if there was a better way to calibrate your Dolby Atmos setup manually? Let's discuss. If you want to get 10% off your Spatial Audio Calibration Toolkit, stay tuned to the end of the video and I'll tell you how. This is the first and only spatial audio calibration disc in the world. And I've had a few weeks to use it, and now I'm ready to tell you what I think. Now, full disclosure, I was sent this disc from TechnoDad. He reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in testing it out, and of course I said yes.
Oh, yes.
However, I'm not getting paid to make this video. I wasn't asked to say a bunch of good things about it. All that was asked of me was to give my honest feedback, and that's what I'm gonna do. But honestly, I have nothing bad to say about this disc. I mean, this thing is truly awesome, and I believe that this is gonna help a lot of people set up their Dolby Atmos theaters, whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced user. Now, I'm not gonna go through every single section in this disc because, quite frankly, there is a lot of tools in here to help you fine-tune your setup. So I'm just gonna highlight some of my favorite tools that I think really stand out and have helped me dial in my setup. All right, so I'm in the theater. I've got the Dolby calibration disc inserted into my Blu-ray player, and for reference, I'm using my Oppo UDP-203 Blu-ray player. And the first thing that I want to highlight is level matching. Now, this is something that if you use room correction, whether it's, YPAL or MCACC, whatever that means, or Anthem Arc room correction or Odyssey, your system automatically does level matching. The difference is when you run those calibration systems, it's telling you to put your microphone in, however many spots, 5, 6, 8, 10 or more. And it's trying to level match all of your seats to this, so that everybody gets the same experience. The issue that comes with that is if it's just you, then maybe you don't really want that, because if you're the only one that uses your theater, like me, I'm pretty much the only one that uses my theater unless friends or family comes over, which is very rare. I don't want an average, because it's going to lower those levels for each speaker. As opposed to if you're just doing it for yourself, you have actual manual control. Also, when you're using those room correction softwares, you don't really know what it's doing. It's doing its thing, but you don't really know what it's doing behind the scenes to level match those. Is it setting it to reference first and then level matching? You don't know. And with something like this, you actually get to see, you actually have 100% control. It's recommended that you turn your volume all the way up and set it to reference, which would be 0. And then you can go from there and calibrate for each speaker from your main listening position. That way, when it's just you in your theater, you know that everything's set to reference and everything is level matched according to your main seating position. And that's something that you really don't get with any other calibration disc. And another thing with those room correction softwares, that's its main purpose, is to correct your room, the acoustics. It's not really a Atmos calibration. And vice versa. This is a Atmos calibration disc, not necessarily room correction. disc. You still need to make sure that you have acoustic treatments, you know, whether it's diffusions, absorptions, stuff like that. Because if you're bad, if your room is bad, then it doesn't really matter what you do. So you want to make sure that you correct your room as much as you can with some type of acoustic treatment. And I believe that this Dolby Atmos calibration disc is designed to use with REW. Now, I don't use REW. I've never used it before. I don't have any experience with it. It is something that I want to tackle in the future. But if you can just start somewhere and just have something like this to where you have 100% manual control, there's nothing else like it. And there's a huge difference in being able to level match your own system, your own speakers, as opposed to letting some other software do it. Now, those room correction softwares, they have their place and they do a very good job of what they're designed to do, is to correct the room for multiple seats. But again, if you're not happy with it, then you have this option. And one thing that I've never really been happy with my, Anthem Genesis, which I absolutely love, it does a great job, but I've never really liked how or what it does to the high frequencies as well as the bass. And I've actually been playing around recently, going back and forth, seeing what I like. And I actually like the way that it sounds with room correction off because there's no limits. And if you're gonna go the way of manual calibration, this just it's a great tool to level match all your speakers, for you, if you're the only one that uses your theater. And then if you want, you can create another profile with the room correction to where it corrects everything if you have friends or family, because who cares? All right, so the next calibration tool that I want to highlight is probably my favorite on this disc, and it's crossover points. Now, when you buy a speaker or you're online looking at a speaker, every speaker manufacturer is going to list their frequency response. There's a minimum and a maximum. Now, I really like this because, as far as I know, there is no other tool or calibration disc or room correction software that allows you to play a frequency sweep across every single speaker in your system to see, does that frequency range that company is listing, is it accurate? Because your speaker might be able to go down to 30 or 40 hertz, but how loud does it play and how accurate is it? And using this tool, I found that a couple of my speakers aren't necessarily very good at the rating that the manufacturer rates. For instance, my in-ceiling speakers, they're just some cheap Polk speakers. They're $250 a pair, and I have the model number right here. So the model number is the Polk RC80i two-way premium 8-inch round speakers. And those speakers, I have 4 of those in my ceiling, and they're rated down to 34 hertz. Now, if you think about that, an 8-inch woofer in a ceiling that's not a box, rated down to 34 hertz, I'm not sure about that. And this is something that I've never really looked at. I mean, I know what the frequency response is, but I've never tried to see, let me see if this is very accurate down to its rating. And using the crossover points, I found that once I got to around 80 or around 60 hertz, I really couldn't hear anything below that. 80 hertz was very clear. 60 hertz, I could still hear something, but then below that, it just completely dropped off. So 34 hertz is not very accurate. Now, that's going to depend on your room. That's going to depend on how high your ceilings are. Everybody's room is going to be different. But in my case, I found that I'm not going to use that speaker and ceiling speaker down to 34 hertz. There's just absolutely no way. I wasn't doing that to begin with. I was crossing everything over 80 hertz. But if you're somebody that wants to try to use your speaker's full range, then this is an awesome tool that I never would have thought to have done to see, what are my speakers actually capable of. And in some cases, I found that there were speakers that I could hear below their rated frequency response. Now, does that mean that it's accurate or that it's going to play loud at that frequency response? Not necessarily, but this is an awesome tool to give you even more control and see, maybe my speakers don't sound that good crossed over at 80 hertz. Maybe one speaker's rated down to 80 hertz, but how loud is it playing? How accurate is it? Is there distortion? So awesome tool. Really like this section on the disc. And then the last tool that I want to kind of highlight is the object panning. Another great tool, again, something that I never really would have thought to test because, you know, I have 9 speakers connected right now. I'm sorry, I have 11 speakers connected right now in my theater in a 7.2.4 configuration. And it sounds awesome. I like it. But when you run this test, you can kind of see where the weak points are in your Atmos setup. And just to give you an example, you know, whenever there is a car driving by, let's say a car drives by on your LCR. So you've got 3 speakers there, right? It's going to go from your left speaker to your center to your right speaker. And it's going to do it very well because there's 3 speakers there. But in the back of the theater, if a car goes, you know, drives by in the back of the theater, it's going to go from your left surround speaker or your left back surround speaker, and then it's going to go to your right back surround speaker. But there's no speaker in between like there is in the front. So maybe that panning, when that car goes by, it goes by really quick and it's not very, very believable. Or something else that I've always noticed and had an issue with is planes or helicopters. When it flies overhead and it goes from, you know, the back, the ceiling speakers to the front ceiling speakers, I've always felt that it pans too quick. And I've always wondered, like, why does it sound like it's, you know, when you hear a plane in real life that flies overhead, it can last a couple seconds, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds before you start not hearing it anymore. And with this calibration disc object panning, it's a great tool because now I see where the weak points are in my theater. You know, maybe I need a, you know, top height speaker in the ceiling for, you know, the front stage. I have 2, but when something's panning, if there's a helicopter or plane, okay, now I see I probably need another speaker in the ceiling, you know, a top height speaker or a top center speaker, whatever it's called, as well as in the middle section. Now I have 2 speakers in the middle. Right now I have my room wired for, I think it's 15 or 16 speakers, but I'm only using 11 because that's all that I can use on my receiver. But I do have plans to upgrade, so now I can see, okay, when I do upgrade, I need to put a speaker here or I need to put a speaker there, and you would never have really been able to gauge that if you didn't have something like this disc. So I really appreciate the object panning as well because it highlights strengths and weaknesses in your setup. Maybe you need to move some speakers around, maybe you need to move your speakers out wider, maybe you need wides in your room. Like in my room, I don't have space for wides. I could probably do it, but it'd be kind of pushing it. But in the future, when I do upgrade, I'm going to make sure that I upgrade to a processor that has, you know, 16 or 20 speakers to where I can place speakers in those missing areas and those weak points. And again, I never would have been able to figure that out. Never would have even thought about that if I didn't have this disc. Okay. I'm going to highlight one more, and it's one that I've already kind of talked about, and it's the crossover points. But I want to specifically focus on the LFE channel. Now, the reason why I want to focus on that is because I'm sure all of us, unless you have a completely perfectly treated room, once you get down into those, you know, 20 hertz, 16 hertz or below, if your subwoofers go that low, you're going to get rattling. And I really like the crossover points because if you have stuff that's rattling on your walls, if you've got posters or if you got some type of memorabilia or something on your wall that's rattling, you might not necessarily know where it is, but with a frequency sweep specifically just for your LFE, you can see what's resonating, what's rattling on your walls or wherever, depending on the frequency response. And that's really what is causing the rattling, right? Once it hits a certain frequency, you know, whatever it is that's on the wall that's rattling. So I actually found out that I had 2 posters on my wall, which, my bad, you know, you really shouldn't have posters on your wall in your theater because it's gonna rattle. But I've always had rattling in my theater and I didn't know what was causing it and where it was. And with the frequency sweep, specifically on the LFE, I was able to find those 2 posters that I had on my wall that were rattling. And again, this is a great tool because you can go and pause if you need to on each frequency response and just see what's rattling. Once you hear it, you can pause it. You can see, okay, there's something rattling at, 60 hertz. For me, everything above 80 hertz was pretty much good. But once I started getting below 60, 50, 40, there's certain things that started rattling, and I was able to find those. And there's still other things that I need to go and find. But again, another great tool on this disc. There's so many tools on this disc, as I've said. I can't cover everything because there's just so much. But you've got tonal balance, you've got speaker pairs, you've got torture test, periodic peak noise. I mean, this disc is just so useful. And I was talking to Technodad, and I was like, I can't believe no one has ever actually created something like this for, an object-based audio setup with Dolby Atmos or DTS:X. And it's really surprising that no one has done that yet. And I can't imagine how many hours, days, weeks, months went into making this disc. So Technodad, Joe and Tel, thank you for making this disc. Technodad, thank you for sending this out to me for review. I think that this is a very, very good tool to use, even if you use this in conjunction with your room correction software, because again, this is a calibration disc. It's not a room correction disc. You still need to make sure that you address whatever acoustic issues you have in your room. But even if you want to do, a hybrid of manual calibration and room correction to get the best of both worlds, or if you just want to go completely manual, this disc is going to help out so many people. And again, thank you guys for creating this disc. So those are just a few of the many, many tools on this disc that were my favorite in helping me dial in and get a better understanding of how my system performs and how it can perform even better in future iterations of my home theater when I upgrade to a processor with a higher channel count. Again, this isn't a room correction tool, it's a calibration tool. You still need to make sure that you appropriately treat your room as best as you can with some acoustic, absorption, diffusion, and reflection panels, and maybe throw in some REW correction curves. After all, I believe that this disc was meant to be used in conjunction with REW, but even if you don't have REW, if you never used it, you can still use this disc and get amazing results. Now, I'm going to be adding some diffusion and bass traps in my theater in some of the areas that need it. And once I do that, I think my theater is going to take another leap in sounding just that much more amazing. And if you're someone like me who relies heavily on room correction, then you can still use this disc to fine-tune your settings and get the best of both worlds. This is truly a wonderful tool to have no matter what skill level you are on your home theater journey. If you'd like to know what my speaker configuration consists of, you can check that out in the video description down below. Now, as promised, I have a discount code for you. If you want to get 10% off your order, enter Cowboy10 at checkout to get 10% off of your physical disc for $99, the digital version for $99, or the bundle for $149. Again, that's code Cowboy10 to get 10% off of your order. All right, before I sign off, I just want to give a huge thank you to Joe and Tel and Technodad for creating such an amazing tool that anybody can use no matter where they're at on their home theater journey, whether they're a beginner, they're intermediate, or an advanced user. This thing truly is something that's never been done before, and I really believe that this is going to help a lot of people. You can even use this with your room correction software, whether it's REW or you're using Odyssey. I'm sure you could probably get better results using this manually. But again, like I said, if you're somebody like me that relies heavily on room correction and needs room correction because of the issues in your room, you can still use this and still get amazing results. You can fine tune your system, or maybe you don't like some of the stuff that your room correction software does. You can go in and check this to make sure that you can use this to make sure that your room correction software is actually calibrating your system for object-based audio content, Dolby Atmos, DTS:X. So thank you guys. Thank you, Technodad, for sending this out to me and trusting me with your baby. I appreciate it. I hope that I did the video justice. I had a lot of fun making this video. So again, thank you. As always, no matter where you're at on your home theater journey, make sure you enjoy it. For Haterade Cowboy Cinema, I'm Haterade Cowboy, and I'll see you guys in the next video.